My hands trembled as I stared at the empty safe, the reality of what had happened slowly sinking in. My name is Lisa Bennett, and I'm a 36-year-old divorced mom who had been meticulously saving every extra penny for my daughter Sophia's college fund. The family reunion at my modest suburban home had seemed like such a good idea at the time, a chance to reconnect, to create memories, to prove to everyone, and maybe to myself, that despite the divorce 3 years ago, I was doing just fine. But now, standing in my bedroom with the safe door hanging open and the $5,000 in cash I'd been saving completely gone, fine was the last thing I felt. My mind immediately flashed to my sister Emily's husband, Mark. There had always been something about him that made me uneasy, the way his eyes lingered a little too long on my possessions, how he'd casually ask about my finances while maintaining that superior smirk. When everyone had left except for Emily and Mark, I'd discovered the missing money and confronted him right there in my living room. "Are you seriously accusing me of taking your money?" he'd asked, his voice dripping with mock offense before breaking into laughter. "Maybe you spent it and forgot, Lisa. You've never been good with money. Isn't that why John left?" The way he laughed in my face, so confident that he'd get away with it, made my blood boil. But what Mark didn't know was that his smug certainty was about to come crashing down, and the look on his face when that door swung open later would be something I'd never forget. Emily and I had always been inseparable growing up, just 18 months apart. We were more like twins than regular sisters. We shared clothes, secrets, and dreams, and even as adults, we called each other almost daily. That all changed when she met Mark Davis at her accounting firm Christmas party 3 years ago. Something shifted in our relationship the moment he entered the picture. At first, I tried to be supportive. Emily seemed happy, and after watching my own marriage crumble, I wanted nothing more than to see my sister find lasting love. But there was always something about Mark that didn't sit right with me. To everyone else, he was charming, successful, and articulate, the perfect catch for my beautiful, intelligent sister. But when others weren't looking, I caught glimpses of a different Mark. The way he'd talk down to waitstaff when his meal wasn't perfect, how he'd make cutting remarks about Emily's appearance wrapped in the guise of helpful suggestions, and especially how he treated me, with a barely concealed condescension that made me feel small and insignificant. "How's the job hunt going, Lisa?" he'd ask at family gatherings, knowing full well I'd been struggling to rebuild my career after giving up my marketing position to raise Sophia during my marriage to John. My divorce had left me financially vulnerable. John had been the primary breadwinner. And while child support helped, I'd been working 2 jobs to maintain a stable home for Sophia. The $5,000 I'd saved represented 6 months of extra shifts at the local cafe and freelance graphic design projects I'd taken on after Sophia went to bed. That money was earmarked specifically for Sophia's college application fees, campus visits, and the initial expenses she'd face as she started her freshman year. Mark knew this because I'd mentioned it at a family dinner last month, proud of having saved so much despite my circumstances. I remember the look he gave me, a mixture of disbelief and something else I couldn't quite identify. Looking back, I should have recognized it as calculation. Over the years, Mark had made countless little digs about my financial situation, asking if I needed to borrow money for Sophia's birthday gifts in front of my parents, commenting on my sensible, meaning cheap clothes, or suggesting investment. Strategies that required capital I clearly didn't have. Each comment was delivered with that same smirk, as though my financial struggles after the divorce were a personal failing, rather than the result of building a life from scratch after 15 years of marriage. The truth was, I'd been proud of that $5,000. It represented independence and a promise to my daughter that her future mattered more to me than anything else. And now it was gone, likely taken by a man who had everything he could want, but still couldn't resist the opportunity to take something from me. I'd spent weeks planning the family reunion, determined to make it perfect despite my limited budget. This would be the first time hosting at my new house, a modest 3-bedroom I'd purchased last year after finally saving enough for a down payment. I wanted to prove to everyone, especially my parents, that the divorce hadn't broken me. The menu was planned with military precision. Homemade appetizers that looked expensive but weren't. A potluck main course where I'd assigned dishes, based on everyone's strengths, and desserts I'd baked myself over 3 late nights after work. I'd cleaned every corner of the house, bought fresh flowers for each room, on sale at the farmer's market, and even painted the guest bathroom that weekend to cover the peeling wallpaper I couldn't afford to replace. The night before, I'd checked the money in my safe, running my fingers over the bills I'd been collecting for months, each one representing hours of extra work and sacrificed personal needs. The safe itself wasn't anything sophisticated, just a basic fireproof box with a combination lock, tucked in the back of my bedroom closet behind shoeboxes and winter sweaters. It wasn't hidden because I expected theft from family. It was hidden because I was embarrassed about keeping cash at home instead of in a bank. But after the bank had frozen my accounts during the divorce proceedings due to John's legal maneuvering, leaving me unable to buy groceries for a week, I'd vowed always to keep emergency cash accessible. The reunion itself went better than I could have hoped. My parents arrived first, Mom immediately taking over the kitchen as she always did, while Dad settled in to watch a baseball game with Sophia. My brother James and his wife came with their twin boys, followed by cousins from both sides of the family and a few aunts and uncles. Emily and Mark arrived fashionably late, Mark immediately commenting on the quaint neighborhood as though it were a charming surprise I didn't live somewhere worse. In total, about 25 people filled my house with conversation, laughter, and the comfortable chaos of family. Throughout the day, I noticed Mark wandering away from the main gathering several times. Initially, I thought nothing of it. People need to use the bathroom or step away for phone calls. But around 4 p.m., as I was heading to my bedroom to grab more hand towels for the bathroom, I saw Mark coming from the direction of my bedroom. "Just looking for the bathroom," he said smoothly, though there was a guest bathroom much closer to the living room. I nodded and pointed him in the right direction, a slight unease settling in my stomach. But then my nephew spilled punch on the carpet. My aunt needed help finding serving spoons, and the moment was forgotten in the rush of hosting duties. Looking back, there were other warning signs I missed. Mark asking peculiarly specific questions about my new home security system over dinner, his unusual interest in helping clean up areas near my bedroom, and how he kept steering conversations toward finances and investments whenever we spoke. But surrounded by family and focused on being the perfect host, these red flags registered only as minor irritations rather than the warning signs they actually were. The party wound down around 9 p.m., with most relatives leaving in a flurry of hugs, promises to get together more often, and containers of leftovers I'd insisted they take. Soon, only Emily and Mark remained, helping me clear the last of the dishes and fold up the extra chairs I'd borrowed from a neighbor. "You're sure you don't want us to stay and finish cleaning up?" Emily asked, always the thoughtful sister. I assured her I was fine and thanked them both for their help. Mark seemed oddly eager to leave, checking his watch repeatedly and mentioning an early meeting the next day. As they gathered their things, I remembered I'd promised to give Emily some photos I'd found while unpacking boxes last week. "Let me just grab those pictures from my room," I said, heading down the hallway. It was a habit born from years of single parenthood, checking my valuables after having guests over, not because I distrusted my family, but because it gave me peace of mind. Almost unconsciously, I opened my closet door, pushed aside the winter sweaters, and reached for the safe. The combination clicked open as always, but when I pulled the door, my heart dropped into my stomach. The envelope containing my carefully saved $5,000 was gone. I checked behind the safe, under it, searched through other items in the closet, convinced I must have moved it and forgotten. But the desperate search only confirmed what I already knew. The money was gone. My hands shaking, I returned to the living room where Emily was helping Mark into his jacket. "The money's gone," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Emily turned, her face confused. "What money, Lisa?" "The $5,000 I saved for Sophia's college fund. It was in my safe, and now it's gone." My eyes fixed directly on Mark, whose expression shifted from confusion to something else entirely. "Are you seriously accusing me of taking your money?" he asked, his voice dripping with mock offense before breaking into laughter. "Maybe you spent it and forgot, Lisa. You've never been good with money. Isn't that why John left?" Emily looked uncomfortable, caught between her sister and husband. "Lisa, I'm sure there's some explanation. Could you have moved it somewhere else for safekeeping before the party?" I shook my head, the shock giving way to anger. "I checked it last night. It was there. Now it's not." Mark's laugh grew more pronounced. "So naturally, your first thought is that I stole it? Wow, Lisa. Just wow." He turned to Emily. "Let's go, babe. Your sister clearly has some issues to work through." Emily hesitated, torn between loyalties. "Call me tomorrow," she said softly, squeezing my arm before following Mark out the door. The moment they left, I tore through the house, checking every possible place I might have moved the money, under mattresses, in drawers, between books, even in the freezer. By midnight, I sat exhausted on my bedroom floor, surrounded by upturned drawers and scattered belongings, completely certain of two things: my money was definitely gone, and Mark Davis had taken it. I barely slept that night, replaying every moment of the reunion in my mind, trying to pinpoint exactly when Mark could have opened my safe. How did he even know the combination? Then I remembered, last Christmas, when I'd received a jewelry box from my parents. I'd mentioned that I'd use the same combination as my safe so I wouldn't forget. Mark had been sitting right there, listening intently while everyone else chatted about the holiday meal. The next morning, after Sophia left for school, I called Emily. My hands were still shaking, but I was determined to address this directly. Emily answered on the third ring, her voice cautious. "Lisa? Is everything okay?" I took a deep breath. "No, Em. Everything is not okay. I've looked everywhere. That money didn't just walk away on its own." There was a long pause. "Lisa, you're not still thinking Mark took it, are you?" The defensive tone in her voice made my heart sink. "Emily, I checked that safe right before the party. The only people in my house yesterday were family, and Mark was the only one I saw, near my bedroom." Emily's voice hardened. "Do you hear yourself? You're accusing my husband of stealing based on what? Him walking down a hallway? People use the bathroom, Lisa." I closed my eyes, trying to stay calm. "I know how it sounds, but—" "No, I don't think you do," Emily interrupted. "Mark works in finance. He makes 6 figures. Why would he need to steal your money?" I heard murmuring in the background, then Emily's voice again. "Mark wants to talk to you." Before I could object, Mark's smooth voice filled the line. "Lisa, Lisa, Lisa," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "I understand you're going through a tough time financially, but projecting your problems onto others isn't healthy." I gripped the phone tighter. "I'm not projecting anything, Mark. I know what was in my safe." He chuckled, the sound sending anger coursing through me. "Look, we all know you've been struggling since John left. Is it possible you spent that money and forgot? Or maybe it wasn't as much as you thought. Stress can do funny things to memory." "I didn't forget anything," I insisted, though a tiny seed of doubt began to form. Had I moved the money? Was I so tired from planning the reunion that I'd done something with it and couldn't remember? "Lisa, I'm worried about you," Mark continued, his voice now filled with mock concern. "First the divorce, then the financial problems, and now you're becoming paranoid and accusatory. Have you considered talking to someone professional? The implication that I was mentally unstable hit me like a slap. I don't need a therapist, Mark. I need my daughter's college fund back. Well, I certainly didn't take it, he replied, his tone hardening. And Emily and I don't appreciate these wild accusations. I think you should take some time to cool off and think about what you're saying. Maybe the money will turn up when you're thinking more clearly. After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table, doubt creeping in despite my certainty. Was I overreacting? Could I have misremembered? I tried to recall exactly when I'd last seen the money, visualizing the bills in the envelope. No, I hadn't imagined it. The money was real, and it was gone. I thought about Sophia, about her excitement when she'd talked about visiting colleges next month. We'd planned a road trip to tour 5 campuses, and that money was supposed to cover our expenses plus application fees. Now I'd have to tell her we couldn't go, or worse, put everything on credit cards I was already struggling to pay off. As the initial shock wore off, something hardened inside me. Mark might have money and status and my sister's loyalty, but I had the truth on my side, and somehow I was going to prove it. That afternoon, I decided to approach this systematically. If Mark thought he could gaslight me into dropping this, he didn't know how stubborn I could be. First, I checked my home security system. 6 months ago, I'd invested in basic cameras for the front and back doors. Nothing fancy, just enough to feel safer as a single woman. To my frustration, I discovered the system had been offline during the party, between 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. Had Mark somehow disabled it? That would require technical knowledge and deliberate planning, suggesting this theft wasn't opportunistic but premeditated. Next, I made a list of everyone who attended the reunion and their movements that I could recall. I started making casual calls, framing them as thank you conversations but steering toward whether they'd noticed anything unusual. My cousin Rachel mentioned something interesting. Actually, I was looking for Mark at one point to ask about some investment advice, but I couldn't find him for almost 20 minutes. Emily said he was probably in the bathroom, but that's a long bathroom break, right? My mother revealed another piece of the puzzle when I called her. You know, Lisa, Mark was asking some odd questions before the reunion. He wanted to know if you'd recovered financially since the divorce, whether you kept cash in the house because of what happened with the bank accounts. I thought he was just concerned. I thanked her and hung up, my suspicions growing stronger. That evening, I scrolled through photos from the party that relatives had posted on social media. In pictures taken between 3:30 and 4:15 p.m., Mark was nowhere to be seen, despite it being during the main meal when everyone was supposed to be together. I also noticed something about my kitchen in one of the background shots. The small ceramic bowl where I kept spare keys, including the key to my bedroom door, was in a slightly different position than usual. The next morning, I called the one person I knew would believe me without question, my ex-husband John. Despite our divorce, we'd maintained a civil relationship for Sophia's sake, and he had always been good at solving problems. John, someone stole the money I was saving for Sophia's college visits, I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm almost certain it was Mark. Unlike everyone else, John didn't question my certainty. Emily's husband? The finance guy? Who always looks like he's smelling something bad? His immediate understanding brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Yes, that's the one. What do you need from me? He asked simply. Evidence, I replied. I need to prove it was him. John was silent for a moment. You should talk to your brother James. He's a cop. He'll know how to handle this properly. James was my younger brother, a police officer in a neighboring district. I hadn't wanted to involve him initially, worried about creating an even bigger family rift. But John was right. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about someone deliberately trying to harm me, and, by extension, Sophia. When I called James and explained everything, he was professionally objective but personally supportive. Lisa, I can't officially investigate this since it's family and out of my jurisdiction, but I can help you gather evidence the right way. Over the next few days, with James and John's guidance, I built a stronger case. I discovered that my bedroom door key, usually kept on a hook in the kitchen, had been returned to a slightly different hook, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. I found a partial fingerprint on my safe that didn't match mine or Sophia's. Most damning of all, when I checked my cell phone bill, I discovered 3 calls from our home phone to a number I didn't recognize during the reunion, when everyone was supposed to be socializing. When James ran the number, it belonged to a locksmith in a neighboring town. The pieces were falling into place, painting a picture of calculated theft rather than opportunistic crime. Mark had planned this, possibly for weeks, using the family reunion as his cover. The question now was how to confront him with evidence strong enough that he couldn't laugh it off or gaslight me again. After almost a week of gathering information, I was ready to set a trap. James had advised me that while we had circumstantial evidence, we needed something more concrete to confront Mark effectively. You need to catch him in a lie, or get him to incriminate himself, James explained. Right now, it's still your word against his. That night, I crafted a carefully worded social media post, tagging family members including Emily. Finally installed hidden cameras throughout my house after the unfortunate incident last week. Feeling much safer knowing everything is being recorded now. Also found an interesting envelope with some important evidence that I'll be taking to the police tomorrow. Sometimes the truth has a way of coming out when you least expect it. It was a complete bluff. There were no hidden cameras, no mysterious envelope with evidence. But Mark didn't know that. I set my phone down and waited. It took less than 15 minutes for my phone to ring, Mark's number flashing on the screen. I nodded to myself, took a deep breath, and answered while simultaneously pressing record on the voice recorder app James had installed on my phone. "Hello?" I said, trying to sound casual. "Lisa, it's Mark," he said, his voice lacking its usual smugness. "I just saw your post online. What's this about evidence?" I kept my tone neutral. "Oh, hello, Mark. Yes, I've been doing some investigating." "Investigating what exactly?" The nervousness in his voice was unmistakable now. "I think you know, Mark, the missing money." There was a pause. "Lisa, we've been through this. I told you I didn't take your money." I made a non-committal sound. The police seemed very interested in what I found. This was pushing the bluff further, but I needed to see how he'd react. "Police? You went to the police?" His voice rose slightly. "Lisa, making false accusations is a serious matter. I could sue you for defamation. The threat might have intimidated me a week ago, but not anymore. It's not a false accusation if it's true, Mark. And the evidence doesn't lie." "What evidence?" he demanded, his composure slipping further. "What exactly do you think you have?" "I'd rather discuss that with Emily present," I replied calmly. "Or with the police. Your choice." Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his tone had changed completely. "Look, Lisa, I think we got off on the wrong foot here. I know things have been tough for you financially. If you're having money problems, Emily and I might be able to help. We could even help you look for the missing money. It has to be somewhere in your house." The sudden offer of help was so transparent I almost laughed. "That's very generous, Mark, but I'm not looking for handouts. I just want what belongs to me returned." "I'm not offering handouts," he backpedaled quickly. "I'm just trying to help family. That's what family does, right?" "Yes, it is," I agreed. "So do the right thing, Mark." I ended the call, my hands shaking, but for an entirely different reason now. He'd been clearly rattled by my bluff, and while he hadn't confessed outright, his sudden change in demeanor and offer of financial help spoke volumes. I immediately called James and played him the recording. "He's definitely nervous," James confirmed. "And that offer to help you look for the money is suspicious as hell. This is good, Lisa, but we need more." I nodded, even though my brother couldn't see me. "What's next?" "We set up a face-to-face confrontation," James replied. "But this time, you won't be alone." The recording of Mark's call spread quickly through the family, despite my intention to keep it between James, John, and myself. My mother, always the family operator, had overheard my conversation with James and took it upon herself to mediate by calling several relatives to discuss the situation. Within days, the entire extended family had taken sides. My parents believed me but urged restraint to avoid permanent family damage. "Lisa, sweetheart, we know you wouldn't make this up," my father said during their visit 2 days after the recorded call. "But is $5,000 worth destroying your relationship with your sister?" I looked at him incredulously. "Dad, this isn't about the money anymore. It's about Mark deliberately stealing from me, then making me feel crazy for suspecting him. And yes, that is worth confronting." My mother wrung her hands. "But Emily's pregnant, Lisa. She told me yesterday. Is this really the time to create such stress in her life?" The news hit me like a physical blow. My sister was pregnant. No, going to have a baby with a man I was now certain was a thief and a liar. The stakes had just gotten much higher. Meanwhile, Emily had stopped taking my calls entirely. She sent a single text. "I can't believe you're doing this to us. Mark is devastated by your accusations. Please get help, Lisa." Other relatives chose sides based on their own relationships and biases. My Aunt Carol, who had always favored Emily, called to tell me I was being selfish and attention-seeking. My cousin Rachel and her husband offered full support, even offering to loan me money to cover Sophia's college visits. The division was painful but clarifying, showing me who truly cared about justice and who preferred comfortable lies. The most difficult conversation was with Sophia. I'd tried to shield her from the situation, but teenagers have a way of discovering everything. She found me at the kitchen table late one night, surrounded by notes and timeline reconstructions. "Mom, what's going on?" Grandma called and she was crying about family drama. I looked at my daughter, so grown up at 17, with her father's analytical mind and my determination. She deserved the truth. "Someone took the money I saved for your college visits, honey. I'm trying to get it back." Sophia sat down, across from me. "It was Uncle Mark, wasn't it? I never liked him." Her perceptiveness shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. "Why do you say that?" "He's always looking at our stuff like he's calculating its value. And at the reunion, I saw him coming out of your bedroom. I thought maybe he was just looking for the bathroom, but he seemed startled when he saw me in the hallway." This was new information, a witness I hadn't even considered. "Why didn't you mention this before?" "I didn't think it was important until I overheard you talking to Dad about the missing money." She reached across the table and took my hand. "Mom, I don't care about the college visits. We can do virtual tours. I don't want you stressing about this." Her selflessness made my throat tight with emotion, but also strengthened my resolve. "No, Sophia, you deserve those campus visits. And this isn't just about money anymore. It's about not letting someone take advantage of us and get away with it." She squeezed my hand. "Then I want to help." "What's the plan?" I explained the confrontation James, John, and I were organizing. Sophia listened intently, occasionally offering insights that only someone her age would think of, like checking if Mark had recently purchased anything expensive that might indicate sudden access to cash. A quick social media check revealed Emily posting about a surprise gift from Mark, a designer handbag she'd been wanting that cost nearly $1,000. The timing, just days after the reunion, was another piece of circumstantial evidence. As we finalized our plan for confrontation, Mark escalated his campaign against me. He began telling family members that I was having serious financial problems and had invented the theft story to get sympathy and money from relatives. He suggested I might be developing mental health issues due to the stress of single motherhood. Most painfully, he convinced Emily to email me a formal letter demanding I cease and desist spreading malicious falsehoods about him, threatening legal action if I continued. The letter, clearly written by Mark but signed by my sister, felt like a betrayal worse than the theft itself. But instead of intimidating me, it only strengthened my determination. The next day, I called Emily one last time. When she didn't answer, I left a voicemail. I'm going to prove Mark stole from me. I'm sorry it's come to this, but I'm not backing down. I love you, and I'll be here when you're ready to hear the truth. Then I texted Mark. I'd like to apologize in person. Can you and Emily come over tomorrow at 7? I think we all need to move past this. His reply came quickly. Finally seeing reason. We'll be there. Everything was set. The trap was ready to spring. I spent the entire day preparing for Mark and Emily's arrival. James came over early, helping me set up recording devices in the living room. Small, unobtrusive cameras borrowed from the police department's community watch program. John arrived. An hour later, his presence a comfort despite our complicated history. You sure you want to go through with this? He asked, as we arranged the furniture to ensure Mark would sit in full view of the hidden camera. Absolutely, I replied. He needs to be exposed for what he is. Sophia had wanted to stay, but I insisted she visit a friend instead. This confrontation could get ugly, and I didn't want her to witness potential family destruction firsthand. At 6:30, James and John hid in Sophia's bedroom, which shared a wall with the living room. They would be able to hear everything through the heating vent, ready to emerge at the right moment. At precisely 7 p.m., the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, checked that the recording devices were active, and opened the door. Emily entered first, her face a mixture of relief and wariness. Mark followed, his expression carefully composed into one of magnanimous forgiveness. Lisa, Emily said, hugging me awkwardly. I'm so glad you called. This whole thing has been awful. It has, I agreed, leading them to the living room. Please, sit down. Mark sat in the exact spot we'd planned, directly facing the hidden camera. I offered them drinks, which they declined, then sat across from them. I want to apologize, I began, watching Mark's face closely. A small, satisfied smile appeared at the corners of his mouth. I've been under a lot of stress lately, and I think I may have jumped to conclusions. Mark nodded sympathetically. We understand, Lisa. Financial pressure can make people act irrationally. Emily and I have discussed it, and we'd like to help you out with a loan for Sophia's college expenses. The audacity of him offering me my own stolen money as a loan made my blood boil, but I maintained my composure. That's very generous, I said. Actually, I have a meeting with the home security company later today. They're upgrading my system after the incident. I saw a flicker of concern cross Mark's face. Oh, what kind of upgrades? Nothing major, I said casually. Just adding a few indoor cameras, improving the recording quality of the existing ones. I stood up. Would you excuse me for a moment? I need to get something from the kitchen. In the kitchen, I retrieved my purse and placed it prominently on the coffee table when I returned. Sorry about that. Where were we? I deliberately left the purse slightly open, the edge of an envelope visible inside. Mark's eyes darted to it repeatedly as we continued our conversation. So this security company, he pressed. Will they be reviewing the footage from the reunion? They might, I said vaguely. They said sometimes older footage can be retrieved even if the system appears to be offline. This was complete fiction, but Mark didn't know that. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Lisa, about that? I've been thinking. Is it possible one of the neighborhood kids might have gotten in during the party? Your back door was open for A while during the barbecue. Interesting theory, I replied. But the money was in a safe that requires a combination. I excused myself again, this time heading to the bathroom. As expected, when I returned, my purse had been moved slightly. I sat down and continued the conversation for another minute before checking my watch. Oh, the security company should be here soon. Mark stood abruptly. We should probably get going then. Don't want to be in the way. Before you go, I said, reaching for my purse. I should check if I have enough cash to tip the technicians. I opened my wallet, then frowned. That's strange. I had $300 in here earlier today. I looked directly at Mark. Did you move my purse while I was in the bathroom, Mark? His face flushed. What? No, of course not. Emily looked confused. Lisa, what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that Mark has a habit of taking money that doesn't belong to him. I stood up, anger finally breaking through my calm facade. Just like he took the $5,000 from my safe during the reunion. Mark's laugh was forced. Not this again. Emily, I told you she needed help. Mark, I said quietly, I know it was you. I have evidence. What evidence? He scoffed. But I could see fear in his eyes. The security system you thought was offline? It wasn't. And my bedroom door that you accessed using the spare key from my kitchen bowl? That triggered a separate alarm system. Another bluff, but delivered with such confidence that doubt crept into his expression. You're making this up, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? I moved toward the hallway. Would you like to see what the police think of my evidence? On cue, the door to Sophia's bedroom opened, and James stepped out, dressed in his full police uniform. John followed behind him, Mark's face drained of color. What is this? Some kind of setup? James stepped forward, his expression professionally neutral. Mr. Davis, we have reason to believe you illegally accessed Ms. Bennett's safe and removed a substantial amount of money without permission. Emily stood up, her face pale. Mark, what's going on? Mark looked frantically between us. This is ridiculous. You can't prove anything. Actually, I said, picking up my purse, the $300 I mentioned, I marked those bills before you arrived, special UV ink. I nodded to James, who produced a small UV light from his pocket. Should we check your pockets, Mark? Or would you prefer to empty them yourself? Mark's composure collapsed entirely. He looked at Emily, who had backed away from him, her hand protectively over her stomach where their unborn child grew. The weight of his actions seemed to finally hit him, what he stood to lose if he continued the charade. It was just sitting there, he said quietly, his voice barely audible. $5,000 in cash, not even in a proper safe. Anyone could have taken it. Emily gasped. Mark, you did take it. You swore to me you didn't. I was going to replace it, he insisted, not looking at any of us. It was just a loan. Lisa doesn't know how to manage money anyway. I was going to invest it, return it with interest. By buying Emily a designer handbag? I asked. Mark's head snapped up. How did you know about that? The same way I knew you took my money. I paid attention. James stepped forward. Mr. Davis, I need you to empty your pockets now. Defeated, Mark reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out my $300. Then, slowly, he removed his wallet and extracted several more bills. The rest is at home, he admitted, in my office safe. Emily burst into tears, decades of sisterly love and recent betrayal colliding in her expression as she looked at me. Lisa, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I really didn't know. As James documented the confession and John comforted Emily, I felt no triumph, only profound sadness and relief. The door that had opened today had revealed ugly truths, but also the strength I'd found in standing up for myself, something I'd forgotten I possessed during the hard years after my divorce. Mark's smirk was long gone, replaced by the hollow, expression of a man who had gambled everything on the assumption that I was too weak to fight back. He had been wrong. The weeks following the confrontation were some of the most difficult and ultimately healing of my life. Mark returned the remaining money the next day, not just my $5,000, but an additional $2,000 that he claimed was interest, though we all knew it was an attempt to avoid formal charges. After much discussion with James, John, and even Sophia, I decided not to press criminal charges, primarily for Emily's sake. My sister was devastated, torn between the husband she thought she knew and the reality of his actions. She moved out of their shared home temporarily, coming to stay with me despite the awkwardness between us. "I should have believed you," she said one night as we sat on my porch swing, the same one we'd sat on as teenagers sharing secrets and dreams. I kept making excuses for his behavior because I couldn't face what that would mean about my choices. I took her hand. "We've all been there, Em. I stayed with John 2 years longer than I should have because I couldn't admit the marriage was over." Emily rested her head on my shoulder, her hand gently caressing her growing belly. "What am I going to do, Lisa? I'm having a baby with someone I can't trust." That question led to many long conversations over the following months. Emily eventually filed for divorce, a painful decision made more complicated by her pregnancy. But watching my strong, capable sister reclaim her agency and set boundaries was inspiring. Mark, faced with the loss of both his marriage and his reputation in the family, sought therapy. Whether out of genuine remorse or strategic image rehabilitation, I couldn't say. Either way, it was a step in the right direction. As for the money, the original $5,000 plus Mark's interest, Sophia and I used it exactly as intended. We took our college road trip in late spring, visiting 5 campuses across 3 states. Watching my daughter's eyes light up when she found her school, a mid-sized university with an excellent graphic design program that offered her a partial scholarship, was worth every extra shift I'd worked to save that money. "I want to study business too, Mom," she told me as we drove home from the final campus tour. "I never want to be financially vulnerable the way we were after you and Dad split up." Her words hit me hard. I hadn't realized how deeply my financial struggles had affected her. "Sophia, I'm sorry if I put too much of that burden on you." She shook her head. "You didn't. You showed me how to be resilient. But I also learned from watching Uncle Mark that money gives people power, and I want to make sure I always have the power to make my own choices." My smart, perceptive daughter had drawn wisdom from our family's painful experience that I hadn't even recognized myself. The incident changed my relationships permanently, but not all for the worse. Emily and I became closer than we'd been since childhood, supporting each other through her divorce and the birth of my nephew, Lucas. My parents, initially focused on maintaining family harmony at all costs, came to understand that sometimes confrontation is necessary to protect what matters. John and I developed a friendship beyond co-parenting, built on the respect that grew when he supported me without question. James and I started a monthly sibling dinner tradition that expanded to include cousins and eventually even Emily again. As for my own growth, the woman who confronted Mark was a different person than the one who had hosted that family reunion. I'd rediscovered my voice, my boundaries, and my inherent worth. I learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. That looking weak to those who would take advantage of you doesn't make you a better person. It makes you a target. And perhaps most importantly, I learned that family isn't defined by blood or marriage certificates, but by who stands beside you when you're fighting for what's right. Today, almost 2 years later, Sophia is thriving in her freshman year at college. Emily is rebuilding her life as a single mother, with Lucas now a happy, babbling 1-year-old who has my father's eyes and Emily's determination. Mark has limited supervised visitation, and though our interactions are strictly about Lucas, he treats me with a caution that borders on respect, a far cry from the condescending smirks of the past. As for me, I've expanded my freelance design work into a small but growing business Recently hiring my first employee. The financial security I've built feels like a personal victory, proof that Mark was wrong about me all along. Sometimes when I look back at that moment when the door opened and Mark's smug certainty crumbled, I feel a complicated mix of emotions. Satisfaction, yes, but also gratitude for the strength I found and the true family that emerged from the wreckage of false appearances. The money didn't just disappear and reappear. It became the catalyst for discovering who would stand beside me when I needed them most. And in the end, that knowledge is worth far more than $5,000 could ever be. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who refused to take you seriously? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the hardest battles we fight are against people who make us doubt ourselves. But as I learned, trusting your instincts and gathering your true supporters can make all the difference. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe for more real-life experiences and lessons learned the hard way. Thank you for listening, and remember, you're stronger than you think, especially when facing those who underestimate you.